Thanks for joining us for the Connect podcast. I'm Cole Phillips, the lead pastor of the Connection Church, and every week we're going to look into the Bible to find out how God's Word connects to our everyday lives. It's going to be life-changing. The Connect podcast is produced every week for your growth and inspiration. You can find all the show notes at makingtheconnection.org. You can also find the podcast on your favorite podcasting service. Follow me on Twitter at Cole Phillips and on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find all the links in the show notes. Now, let's get into the study. All right, good morning. It's so glad that you are here. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that Bobby Fraumann is here today. We're doing something a little different, and I've had this in my mind for a long time that some of these Bible passages really work well for us to talk about some of these issues just in a practical way about how this impacts, how this can impact us and how it's impacted us and how we think it can apply to your lives. And so we are going through the book of Acts. We're looking at it right now. We've been in Acts chapter 9, and in Acts chapter 9, we've seen Paul or Saul, who's renamed Paul. Yeah. We see his conversion, his like extreme conversion. We see his healing that takes place with Ananias and how he sort of makes this transition. But, at some point he's got to get out there and get in the game. And everybody has that moment where it's time to step up. You think about Paul, and Paul is arguably, or really inarguably, the most impacting leader who has made a difference in the world, really carried Christianity into the world and has changed the world, so much. He wrote so much of the New Testament. And so he had to start somewhere. Even Paul had to start somewhere. So today we're looking at his humble beginnings, and we've been there. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me just, I want to read the passage that we're going to discuss, and then we'll kind of get into five steps or ways that we can step into ministry, step into more than ministry. It's really leading people into a relationship with Jesus. And so let's read Acts chapter 9, verses 19 through 22. It's a very short passage, but it's so thick and rich that we're going to get into. It says this in verse 19. Afterward, he ate some food. This Paul, he ate some food and regained his strength. Saul stayed with the believers in Damascus for a few days, and immediately he began preaching about Jesus in the synagogues, saying, "He is indeed the Son of God." All who heard him were amazed. "Isn't this the same man who caused such devastation?" That's a good word, devastation, among Jesus' followers in Jerusalem, they asked. "And didn't he come here to arrest them and take them in chains to the leading priests?" And Saul's preaching became more and more powerful, and the Jews in Damascus couldn't refute his proofs that Jesus was indeed the Messiah. So I want us to talk about 5 factors for how, if you're ready, if you say maybe you've been a Christian a long time, or maybe you're a new Christian, you're a new believer, but you say, how can I really get into the game? How can I begin to influence people, influence my world as a follower of Jesus, and lead people into a relationship with him? And the first one that we see in verse 19 is that Saul took care of his physical health.
He ate some food.
He ate. I mean, it's so simple, right? He ate some food. I think that's funny because, you watch TV shows sometimes, like if you watch 24, were you a fan of 24, or did you watch
Not really.
Jack Bauer?
A little bit.
Mission Impossible, any of these action shows, and all this is going on, and it's like these people are not eating, they're not going to the bathroom, none of the normal things that you have to do in order to, to live, right? But this I think this shows the reality of the things that happen in Scripture. Like he ate some food, just a normal thing, and regained his strength.
I was talking to somebody about this very topic, and I was expressing that I think the spiritual and the physical go hand in hand. God created our bodies. God created our systems. He created the food that we're supposed to eat. So he's already like the perfect nutritionalist, and he's got everything planned out. And if you neglect that at the physical level, I really do think that it affects you at being everything God's called you to be at the spiritual level. And so we were kind of talking about one of the more spiritual disciplines is living a healthy lifestyle.
This is one of the most neglected things that,
I think so, for sure.
we point the finger about a lot of sin out there that this is wrong. But at the same time, the way we treat our bodies, it can be wrong if we're not being a good example, and we're not taking care of our bodies. Saul hadn't eaten or drank anything for 3 days. So he was hungry, he was tired. And what I've found,
probably grumpy,
sure, hangry. Ministry requires strength, physical strength. It's using your body. This is the body we have, God has given us. And Romans 12:1 says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him." I think sometimes I read over that verse and I think, we don't take it so literally. We think give your bodies, give your lives, but it actually says your body,
your physical body,
give it to God.
Your physical body. How do you do that?
And what are you giving? What kind of offering are you offering to God with your physical body? Now, before we get into all this, let me just say, I understand that this is a hard area, and sometimes, you're dealing with some health issues that maybe are genetic, some other things. They're not just based on lifestyle choices, but a lot of it can be controlled with our lifestyle choices. And ministry, I just think it's getting our hands dirty. It's so funny because people think ministry is, it's
glamorous.
Glamorous, yeah. Studying the Bible and, teaching the Bible, which we love to do. You and I both love to do that. Mm-hmm. But how often is it, hey, Bobby, I know you have a truck. Can you help me move?
It's 90% hands and feet in the mud, going after, working, doing anything and everything that we possibly can. So,
and that's where
physically ministry is more demanding than I ever thought.
Yeah, and that's where you're doing ministry really, as you're working alongside some guys. Sometimes you're getting things done because that's how guys are physical, and we'd rather be doing, and we can talk while we're doing. But so you do a lot of that. Let's talk about the first ingredient of that, and that is our diet, what we put in our pie hole, right? Yeah. And
my wife says I eat too much sugar.
Oh, well,
and I tell her, babe, you are what you eat.
You're sweet. Yes,
I must
so
be
sweet.
Sweet.
One of the things in church life is there's a lot of parties. There's a lot of get-togethers, and they always involve food. So, it's easy, even if you're trying to eat the right things, there's just always a cake. There's always, things like that. And too often we find our comfort and our fulfillment in a pleasure in our food. Instead of eating to live, we're living to eat. We can't wait for our next meal. And this is not an area that I'm great in. Let me start by saying this. So for the first 45 years of my life, I did zero exercise, no no physical exercise, and I was pretty sedentary, and just ate what I wanted. In fact, I didn't eat breakfast. I started eating, lunch. It was usually fast food, and and then lots of Dr. Pepper.
It was Diet Coke.
And then I tried to
it was Diet Coke.
do something different. I couldn't stand the smell of Diet Coke. Then I started acquiring a taste for it. And man, you can drink massive amounts of Diet Coke and never feel full. But your body treats it the same way as it does sugar. And so there's nothing diet about it. And then I got to where I wasn't liking that so much. So now I still drink I usually drink a soda a day, a Dr. Pepper a day. So it's very limited. It's, like 12 ounces as opposed to, with Diet Coke, I was drinking 140 ounces a day.
I think that's awesome, though. I think it's encouraging for anyone watching that it doesn't matter where you're at in life. It's never too late to start. And I think the first step is the hardest one, but it's never the biggest one. Start small. What can you cut out right now? What can you focus on? What can you start to? Maybe I need to start taking my vitamins.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to talk about because I thought it'd be interesting. I almost brought them, but I'd take the multivitamins every day.
Right.
I take, in addition to that, I have an extra vitamin D, a zinc, Mega Red, which is krill oil.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I also have I was drinking the apple cider vinegar, just having the little shot of that. And it's not bad once you get used to it. But now I have the gummy version of it. So I have that. Those are some supplements that I take.
How do you feel?
I don't know. I can't imagine.
They don't work.
Well, I'm not saying they don't work. I just, I can't imagine what I would be like if I weren't taking that because I still, get tired and things like that. But and Bobby, I would just say about you, you've had various levels of physical health in the, how long have we known each other?
Since 2012.
So 11 years.
2011.
2011. So what's that? 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years. You've had various levels of
had first kids and got. So when we first met, I was right out of the Marine Corps.
Yes.
And I was putting on that first kid baby weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere a couple years later, dropped it all, got in shape. And
we got you back in your uniform at some point, like within a year or two, but it was tight.
It looked like I was
I don't think you could
I wasn't swole.
I don't think you wear it now because you're much more swole than you were, like much more
I don't
ripped.
know about that, but yeah, I couldn't fit in it. No.
So
it's hard. It's hard to stay the course.
Yeah.
With it. But I do believe that if your diet is on point, at least trying to get it regulated and watching what you put in your body, it translates to energy. And if I have the energy and I feel good, now I can take it to the next level and maybe go work out, exercise, lift weights.
Yeah. So it helps you. You were talking about this mental clarity, gives you that, helps you stay alert. But then there's also exercise. We got to move our bodies. And, the Bible says 1 Timothy 4:8, it says physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and the life to come. We read that and we're like, oh, well, this is about saying, the training for godliness, it's more important, but he does say physical training is good. It's not like, don't do that. Because this is the one body we have and we want to go the distance. And what I've found is that too often, if you're, getting caught up in ministry, sometimes we neglect our health. What I've found as I've gotten healthier is I've been able to connect with some people that normally wouldn't necessarily, listen to what I had to say. And this is the only body that you've got, and we want to go the distance for ministry and for God, to be used by God.
I've got an illustration that I've always used to kind of encourage me that life is like going up the down escalator in the mall. Remember those?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
I don't know about the
because we don't have malls anymore,
but
really.
the escalators, as a kid, I would always try to run up the going down escalator, and I could get to the top. And I think the older you get in life, the harder it is to get up the down escalator, physically speaking, because you're going downhill pretty fast. So the moment that you stop, and the moment that you're stagnant, and the moment that you stand still, you start to go downhill a lot faster. And it takes more effort and it takes more energy, as I've been in my mid-20s, early 30s, now late 30s, heading into my 40s, that I have to put even more effort to just stay where I'm at or to gain a little bit of ground. So to go back to maybe like the diet point, like I've noticed as when I get that in check, I have more energy to put into the physical side, the exercise side.
Yeah. It all kind of works together.
The moment you stop, you go downhill really quick, and it's hard to come back from.
Again, the reason we want to do this is, because God has called us for a purpose. He wants us to influence and impact people's lives. Part of it is we take care of our bodies. This is what we see Paul do. In verse 19, also, we see that Paul spent time with other believers. He joined up with other believers. And so it says Saul stayed with the believers in Damascus for a few days. This is all about community, being a part of the Christian body, really. And, if you're following Jesus, especially as a new Christian, you want to be around other Christians. You need to be around other Christians, no matter where you're at in your growth level. And I've seen some people who they're like, they're in a church, but they have this sense that they want to do something for God. So they're like, I'm going to leave the church. I'm going to go do my own thing. Yeah. And that's always a red flag. That's always dangerous. There's dangers of Lone Ranger Christians. If you can't do the ministry that God has called you under the leading and the umbrella of your church, I always wonder, is this an area of pride in your life? Maybe you're not seeing yourself as you are. We need people alongside of us. We need accountability in our life. This is how we grow. Yes, God calls you. God has a call for your life. But that call is affirmed through your church family, through your Christian
100%
family. How did you, what difference did that make for you when you stepped in to the Connection Church and began to get in Christian community? How did that impact and influence your effectiveness?
I don't really feel like I was brought up in a church environment where we were in community. My family would go to church, but we were, in my teenagers, I was in and out of a handful of churches, never really plugging into the community aspect of church, just there to receive, to be fed. When I came to the Connection Church and started getting plugged in and serving and being around community, I just felt like I was constantly being filled up by the people that I was surrounding myself with, who I was on whatever team it was serving, whether that was worship or the creative setup, tear down team, the parking lot. That when you put yourself around other people, there is something that was energizing, exciting about it. And then there's the accountability piece that came into play. There was my life was at an all-time low, and I knew that I needed to get back into a relationship with God, and that God was using other people, is what I saw in the church in the very beginning stages, to surround me, to help hold me accountable, to encourage, to push me to grow in God, grow in the Lord, seek Him first, put Him first in my life, work on my marriage, work on being the father that God's called me to be. And I would not have been in the place, I would not be here today if it had not been for the community that came around me. But I had to let myself. You have to let yourself.
Yeah. And engage, because I think some people do. They come into church. It's almost like I dare you to engage me or
it took a lot. It takes humility. You were talking about the pride piece. It takes humility. You got to drop the ego and say, all right, church is not a what do you say? It's a museum for the rich, or it's a hospital for the broken.
Yeah.
And realizing that I'm broken and that I need help, and allowing other people into my life to help.
Well, I was thinking about that from this passage and from Paul as well. You know, when he was saved, at the beginning of this chapter, he was mad. He was so mad because he had just overseen the death of Stephen, and but what was his anger toward? His anger was that he had some level of conviction from Stephen. He saw Stephen's, he saw his courage, and so he was mad. And sometimes when people could challenge you, it causes us to get mad.
Yes,
we don't like it very much, but at the same time, God uses it. God uses it to draw us to Him if we will humble ourselves and will.
I've used it a lot before, but when Cadence was in kindergarten, my oldest son, he said, "Dad, do you know what the greatest weakness of a zebra is?" It's like, "It's stripes, man." And he's like, "Yeah, they can be spotted on the plains of Africa by a mile away with the lions." And he goes, "But you know what the greatest strength of the zebra is?" "I have no idea, son. Tell me." "The stripes." To which I was a little bit dumbfounded, because I was like, it's an oxymoron. It can't be the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. The stripes, when you're alone and isolated, you stick out like a sore thumb to all the lions, all the predators, all the prey. But when the zebras are in their herd, when they're together, their stripes run together. And when the lions are in pursuit, it's really hard, almost impossible, because everything runs together and blends together. I just take that same thing and apply it to Christians. By His stripes we are healed. We have stripes as Christians, and there is an enemy. Peter talks about the devil who's a roaring lion seeking to destroy those who he can devour, and he will always try to pick you off on the battlefield of isolation.
Yeah.
So he's going to do everything he can to distract you, to get you away from community, because there's safety in numbers. Ecclesiastes talks about that, right?
Right. You know what a group of zebras is called?
I believe it's a gaggle.
No. It's a dazzle.
A dazzle. Wow.
Okay.
Learning something new every day.
No, I was learning from you, but it takes a community in order to be effective at reaching people, because people go, one person can be crazy, but they see everybody work. We all come together and worship, and they think all these people can't be crazy. Some people, what I said is, some people need to be team tackled into the kingdom.
Oh, that's good.
And, so yeah, rather than doing this in isolation, we join up with other believers, and that will help you fulfill your mission. And that's how I see our church. I see it as, this is a resource to help people fulfill their mission that God has called them to influence their circle, their world. The third one that we see here is this. We see Paul started telling people about Jesus. It wasn't like there was this waiting period. Look at verse 20. It says, "And immediately he began preaching about Jesus in the synagogues, saying, 'He is indeed the Son of God.'" So his preach all about Jesus. It was Jesus focused. He wasn't talking about himself. He wasn't talking about secondary things. He focused in on what was most important. And if you will talk about Jesus, you can't go wrong. I mean, people can debate all kinds of things, but especially when you talk about your encounter with Jesus, what Jesus did. And we see this 2 Corinthians 4:5. "You see, we don't go around preaching about ourselves," he said. "We preach that Jesus Christ is Lord, and we ourselves are your servants for Jesus' sake." And, the thing about new Christians is, usually when you are just saved, you're excited, you're passionate, pumped up. God is doing a work in your life. And that's when you want to go tell people. New Christians are the best inviters to the church. They're excited. But sometimes in the church, you get, crusty Christians that just say, you'll calm down like the rest of us, give it a few weeks. Or I've seen this on social media in the past couple of days, of people saying, "Hey, if you're a new Christian, don't start a podcast. Don't
Really?
And I get that, because they're saying, well, you'll do more damage. You really don't know what you don't know. There's a side to that that's true, but the other side is just the passion and the fact that all of us, no matter what your level of maturity is, you still have a mission, and I think it starts right then. It starts immediately. So you have any thoughts on that?
It reminds me of Revelation chapter 12, verse 11, which says they overcame him, which would be the devil, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And I think a lot of times we understand the significance of the cross and what the blood that Jesus sacrificed for us covers, and the power that's in the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of Christ unto salvation. But we forget that second part of Revelation chapter 12, 11, that says, and the word of their testimony. The testimony has power.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what stage of faith you're in, however many years of experience you got under your belt. You have a sword to wield, and that's your story. And the devil does not like us talking about what God has done in our lives, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing the gospel. And so if that's what God can do for you, he could do it for me. And so he'll do everything he can to silence your tongue. And so I think this is, the application there is so powerful. As soon as God's doing something in your life, start talking about it. Start preaching it.
Well, I think about the blind man that was healed, and they were asking him, who is this man who healed you? And he said, I don't know. All I know is
I was blind, but now I can see.
I was blind, now I see. And so what do you know? Share that. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to know that. But I do think there are some people that are sort of professional students. They want to, study, and study's good. And Paul, he had all the
education,
study of the Old Testament scripture. So he knew that. But at the same time, if you're just in school, and I saw this when I was in, doing all my degrees and things, there were people who would study, they would do degrees, but they weren't serving in ministry. And you just don't know what you don't know until you get in with real people, and and you're really doing it. You're not going to be you're not going to be effective. So you just got to get in there and do it. And then the fourth thing that Paul does, we see, is that it was his life that was a picture. His life was a picture of the change that Jesus can make. So verse 21 says, all who heard him were amazed. Isn't this the same man who caused such devastation among Jesus' followers in Jerusalem? They asked, and didn't he come here to arrest them and take them in chains to the leading priests? They were expecting Paul to come in and just round up all the Christians and slaughter them. I mean, they thought this was going to be that, and instead they see him coming in and leading people into a relationship with Jesus. They said, this can't be the same guy. There is a obvious radical life change that's taken place in his life. And people need to see that. If you're going to influence people, if you're going to lead people to Jesus or tell people about Jesus, listen, you got to be living that out, because our life speaks so loud many times that people cannot hear what we're saying.
Wow.
And we've got to,
that's good.
Yeah, we got to live it. We got to live it. And,
say that again, because I've heard the saying, talk is cheap. And actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
But what did you just say?
I said, sometimes our life speaks so loud that people can't hear what you're saying.
That's good.
They hear our words, but they look at our life and they say, well, you don't believe that. Powerful. You're not living that. So we got to live it. And, that's hard. Now that doesn't,
I love what it is. So if you go back to verse 21, sorry to interrupt, but all who heard him. And so I do believe, that their ears, but more than with they weren't just listening to him as much as I think they're watching him. And I think that's something I'm trying to understand myself, being a parent with kids.
Yeah.
When I was a youth
pastor. So on parent, we say faith is caught more than taught.
Yeah.
Because little eyes are watching you.
Yeah. It's not about what you say. if what you're saying is not lining up or congruent with what you're doing,
yeah,
then we have an issue.
yeah,
And people are watching more than they're listening.
yeah, yeah. So, and that doesn't mean that you're going to get it right all the time, that you're going to be perfect. It's not that kind of standard. Or, this is especially hard in our families, because our families see us at our worst, and they say, when you've blown it. How do you? I'm asking you.
Yeah. So I think you own it first and foremost. One of the things that I've tried to do with my kids is when I do lose my temper, when I do cross the line, when I've lost all patience, when I blow up, once I cool down, and I think that's a very important step, like take a step back, cool down. Maybe before I go to my children, I need to go to my father and let him work on me and my heart, and then go back to my children and say, hey, Dad screwed up. I'm sorry. And they usually say, Dad, it's okay. I love you. I'm like, no, it's not okay. I'm not perfect, but that's not what I want to model for you. I want to model a father's perfect love. And so I'm coming to you and telling you I'm sorry, and I want to be better. And so I think owning it and apologizing for it are huge steps.
Yeah. And I think, rather than being, putting on a show that you've got it all together,
right,
when you do blow it, that can be a real growth moment as well, because people need to see, how do we handle that? How are we gonna go to God in that? Are we gonna apologize?
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? Are we gonna change?
Family pastors, I tell lots of married couples, my wife and I, that if the kids see you fight, they need to see you make up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
we don't want them just see how to fight in the home. We also want them to see the restoration and the resolution.
Yeah. Kids need to learn how to handle conflict in a way that is constructive and not just destructive and tearing down.
And I think that's probably playing into Paul's experience here. He's got a reputation.
Yeah.
That it's not like he's doing damage control, but he's changing up his direction, his course. He's known for this, and now he's doing this. And I think that's, we're looking at day 1, day 2, week 1 here of him trying to go, hey, I'm no longer playing for that team anymore. I'm playing for this. And so the importance of being consistent with that.
Yeah. What a reminder, though, that, how God changes lives, how, God can use anyone, no matter what your past is.
In a moment.
And you can talk about your past, but at the same time, it's not about that. The past is past. God wants to use you in your future.
The devil knows your name and calls you by your past. God knows your past, calls you by your name.
That's good. That's good. Let's look at this last one, and that is in verse 22, that Paul improved. He kept working on his effectiveness, growing his effectiveness and his skills. He learned what it was that was going to most influence people. What is it he needed to talk about? So in verse 22, it says Saul's preaching became more and more powerful, and the Jews in Damascus couldn't refute his proofs that Jesus was indeed the Messiah. So, he kept on growing. He kept on speaking. His spiritual strength personally, internally grew as he saw God was using him. God was working through him. I mean, even, he probably had no idea the kind of impact he was going to have. And this is a throwback to reminds me of when you stepped up as our student pastor.
Oh my goodness.
And so when Bobby was stepping up to teach youth, to lead youth, how old were you then? We said it was 2012, right? Or 2000?
Yeah. So 27
years old. But, so Bobby, he got up one night and he's speaking. I didn't want him speaking. I thought, we'd be better off showing a video,
28.
and he's like, no, I want to preach this message. And he did. And I'm sitting back there listening to Bobby's sermon, and it was so confusing. I did not know what you were talking about. And I was like, just confusing. And then you did a thing where you led kids to make a decision for Christ.
An invitation.
Yeah. You said, hey, raise your hand if you want to trust in Jesus.
And hands went up.
Hands went up all over the room. And I was like, look, I
don't know what happened. I thought they felt sorry for me.
No, it was they were legit decisions.
They felt bad for me.
And I said, God is working through you, and he's going to work through you. And not only that, but from that moment, and to see, now when you get up.
Back up, I remember going the next day, or I wasn't even on staff at that time. So when it was whenever I could come back into the office. I don't know if we caught lunch, but I remember having a meeting at some point shortly thereafter, and you encouraging me, because I felt really depressed and really down. Like I just swung and missed, and I am definitely not called for this. And you were encouraging me like, hey, God's word was preached, maybe not clearly, but you definitely have a calling on your life. And I want to challenge you to grow in that calling, to develop that calling, to stay consistent, to get back up and swing the bat again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have, if it had not have been for you.
Well, and it goes without saying, those of you who hear Bobby's messages, just how powerful and how God uses him. And he's continued to sharpen that skill. This is not just about preaching, though. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about you going out and talking with people just in a natural way. It's not all about getting on a platform and preaching and all of that. It's about allowing God to work through you, and not giving up, because, there may be some people in your life that you think they're so far gone. There's no way they're going to respond. But what we see from Saul's example is he just kept on consistently doing what God wanted him to do.
I watched a short the other night, YouTube shorts, and it was this power lifter. And so the first half of the short is, I guess, him 10 years ago. And he's this little skinny guy with big nerdy glasses.
Wow.
And he's bench pressing he's squatting, 385. And his knees are nodding in on his way up, and he's shaking and he's trembling. And then, the cool TikTok music comes in, like dun, 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 dun. And all of a sudden it's like, fast forward 10 years later, the guy's put on 100 pounds of muscle. He's squatting 777 pounds like it's nothing and winning the powerlifting championship. And he says, everybody loves the transformation video that you see in 15, 20 seconds, but you didn't see the 10 years of grind and consistency
that's
and
a
working and the diligence to develop. Yeah. That kind of strength.
385 though. That's not bad.
No, I mean, it wasn't like he was, he was a lot skinnier than he was at the 10-year mark. So I find that interesting. Everybody wants to see the transformation. Nobody really wants to look at what it looks like to stay diligent. Paul's life he didn't have it in a week. He had to work at it.
The way I say that is, people look at people who are effectively, doing it. They say they want to do what you're doing, but they don't want to do what you did.
Wow.
They don't see the overnight successes. They're rarely an overnight success. It comes with consistency and putting in the sweat equity, putting in the work.
And every one of us has a gift by God given that is unique to us. And I think there is a call on our lives to develop that unique gift so that God can use it. And I love David. He's one of my favorite Bible characters. And I love that about him. I always admire his diligence on the shepherd field that prepared him for the battlefield. He takes 5 bullets into a fight with a champion.
Yeah.
That's a lot of confidence. Where do you get that kind of confidence? He must have thrown a lot of rocks on the shepherd field to where he got so prepared that he was godfident, as you would say. But it comes through, he was faithful on on using the small stage,
the little things, yeah,
the little things that was preparing him to be used by God for the big things.
Well, that's great, man. Well, if you want to step up, I would encourage you to begin today. Don't wait. You know what God's doing in your life, and so if you'll take some of these steps we talked about today, I know for a fact God is going to use you in great ways, and we can't wait to hear about it. And we're excited. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have you back again. This worked out real well, and we'll see y'all. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you really soon.
See you tonight.
Tonight we got hot summer nights, and wear your Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
We'll see you then. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.